like to call to order the Thursday, May 2nd, 2024 meeting of the City of Urbana Building Safety Code Board of Appeals. Vivian, could we have a roll call, please?
Scott Dunkel.
Here.
Gary Burgess. Here. Daryl Fry.
All right, we have a quorum. First order of business is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting from January 11th, 2024. If the board members have had an opportunity to review the minutes or entertain any corrections, additions, or deletions.
I make a motion to approve.
Motion approved by Brad. Second by Gary. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. I don't believe we have any old business, so we'll move under new business. We do have one public hearing on today's schedule, so I'm going to go ahead and open that, and then I will talk through a little bit the process we're going to go through. So at this point, we're going to open the public hearing for BSC BA 24-A-01's Signature Homes Appeal Section R313.2 of the 2021 International Residential Code and calculation of square footage interpretation. So that's the matter we're going to hear today. The process we're going to go through is we'll have an opening statement, just a brief opening statement explaining the matter under appeal, first by city staff and then by the appellant. We'll follow that up by a presentation by city staff. Any other opponents of the appeal, then the appellant will have an opportunity to present evidence along with any proponents of the appeal. There'll be an opportunity for rebuttal evidence from city staff and then followed by rebuttal evidence from the appellant. There'll be a sur-rebuttal, which is a follow-up rebuttal by city staff at my discretion. There'll be a closing statement by the appellant, a closing statement by the city staff. We'll have discussion amongst us in the board of the evidence and arguments presented. There will be a motion at that point and a vote on that, and then hearing closes. And I believe the format of the motion has to be in the format of approving the appeal. And so if the vote fails, then that's taken as a not approving the appeal. So just so we understand how that works. So we'll begin with an opening statement, first by city staff and then by appellant. And again, this is just a very brief summary of the matter at hand from each of you, and then we'll have a follow-up where you'll get a chance to get into detail a little bit more.
Thank you. Nick Hansen, building official. Basically, we received a permit application from Signature Homes for a new single-family residence. In 2021, when last year when we adopted the 21-21 codes, we amended the residential code requiring sprinklers for houses over 6,000 square feet. The floor plan that was submitted, they submitted it, calculated at 6,053 square feet. An overlay of those drawings presented at 6,575 square feet, thus requiring a sprinkler system.
Thank you. Would you mind just introducing yourselves as representing the appellants?
Yeah, I'm Adam Repholz, and I'm a builder for Signature Homes, and this is actually the buyer, Dion Clifton, so she's the client that's working with us on
Wonderful.
this. So.
Okay. Yeah, so if you could just do similar kind of just a brief overview.
Sure, yeah, really quick, really brief. So the original application was for, the total square footage was over 6,000 something. Now, the gross square foot calculation, by our understanding, can be taken from the inside walls as opposed to the exterior walls. So we redid the calculation based off the inside walls, and we came in at, I think it was 5,600, 700 or so, but under 6,000 square foot. So our, I suppose, argument you would say is that we are indeed under 6,000 square foot, and therefore a sprinkler system shouldn't be required.
Okay. Thank you. At this point, then, we'd move into presentation of evidence by city staff, and this is where your opportunity for a more detailed presentation of how you're interpreting this section of the code and how that's contrary to the appellant's interpretation.
So again, looking at the submitted documents, I'll just read the section out of our adopting ordinance first. Section R 313.2, 1 and 2 family dwellings automatic fire systems. An automatic residential fire sprinkler system shall be installed in 1 and 2 family dwellings over 6,000 gross square feet. Exception, An automatic residential fire sprinkler shall not be required for additions or alterations to existing buildings that are not already provided with an automatic residential sprinkler system. So the key here is defining what is gross square feet. Unfortunately, that terminology is not defined in the residential code, in the IRC. However, it is clearly defined in the IBC, the International Building Code. The International Residential Code does state that if it is not defined in that code, you can use other codes where it is defined as the definition. So when you look at the definition for gross square footage, that includes everything inside perimeter of the exterior walls. So the interpretation is there is 2 areas within the home on the second floor that are considered open space to the first floor. However, based on that terminology, that is still space within the 4 walls. So so our interpretation was that that's counted. So we relayed that to Signature Homes, who responded, originally disagreed with it. And so I reached out to the International Code Council for an interpretation from them, which is quoted in the packet itself, including the attachment number 1 is the email that I received back from ICC, basically in agreement with the city's interpretation of the definition of gross square footage. So again, we view the property, the design at over 6,500 square feet.
Absolutely. Just so we're clear on this, the question really at hand is an area of the second floor that's open to the first floor, where there isn't a floor system per se there, but the question is the sort of implied area of that included in the calculation? Is that really sort of the crux of the question?
Correct, based off of the builder's, calculations, right? Because as they explained to me, they can't sell square footage that's not there.
Right.
While I understand that, it's still square footage that can lead to additional fire load, additional smoke buildup, additional heat buildup and such. So.
Understand, okay. I just want to make sure we
Yep.
had sort of the, making sure. Anything else from staff on your report? Okay. All right, so now we've moved to an opportunity for presentation of evidence by the appellant and any, I'm sorry, I should ask, just to be formal here, if any member of the public wishes to speak to this, sorry, I just have to do it. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the appellant, give you an opportunity to present any evidence that you have, and then we'll hear from any proponents from the public as well. So go ahead.
So I actually looked up the definition.
And is your speaker on, microphone?
Yeah, can
Okay,
you hear me?
Yeah.
So I looked up the definition, according to the IFC and ICC code, is the floor area within the inside perimeter of the exterior walls of the building. So while I understand that the open space presents additional space, it's not floor area. And so, I understand counting that space once, but counting it twice doesn't seem to be within the definition. I also called the ICC and spoke with Philip Gronkowski on April 15th. He is the representative who works out of the Chicago office. He provided his phone number and extension. I provided that to the city official. He was helpful and indicated that a good rule of thumb is it is where feet can be, thus the term square footage. And he would not count that open space. That would be twice, that would be excluded from the total gross square footage space.
And I'm sorry, could you repeat again? Who was it you spoke with?
Philip Gronkowski.
And he's with ICC, you said?
Yes, phone number is 708-799-2300, extension 4303.
And he's in their Chicago office, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't have anything additional to add. It's kind of it's already kind of a brief summary of what so I think we all understand what the
what the issue at hand
Yeah,
is.
with the issue, exactly right, yeah.
All right, no public commentary I see on that. All right, I have an opportunity now for presentation of rebuttal evidence by city staff. And I'll remind staff that what this has to be is not introduction of new evidence, but rebuttal to what was presented by the appellant.
Again, just to clarify, if you simply can go to the commentary for that section of the code, for the definition of gross floor area, and that commentary clearly indicates the area of all occupiable and non-occupiable spaces. So, and that is in the memo that we presented, and is also quoted from the ICC interpretation.
Anything else? Okay. All right, and then we have an opportunity for rebuttal by the appellant.
Not much of a rebuttal here, really. But I think getting to the matter at hand, I think that we're getting foggy because there's multiple different definitions that are being thrown in. And our key argument I say because I don't have a better word, is the amendment to the code is 6,000 square foot. So we're trying to follow the code and we're underneath what the amendment is. Now, there are rules when you get into fire sprinkler system with commercial and with residential that all get kind of gray, but essentially I think that the amendment was in place to put a number on the size of the house, and I think we're under that size of the house. So that's, unless you have anything else to add.
All right, thank you. There is an opportunity for additional rebuttal if you wish. Okay, decline. All right, we'll do a closing statement then by appellant. So if there's any, we have to go through the process, so apologize.
So just to reiterate what the definition is, it says the floor area within the inside perimeter of the exterior walls of the building under consideration, exclusive of vent shafts and courts, without deduction for corridors, stairways, ramps, closets, the thickness of interior walls, columns, or other features, the floor area of a building or portion thereof not provided with surrounding exterior walls shall be the usable area under the horizontal projection of the roof or floor above. The gross floor area shall not include shafts with no openings or interior courts. So while I do understand that the position is that we need to be able to count, this open space twice because it's a 19-foot ceiling, I think under that interpretation, what stops us from counting it 3 times? Or 4.
All right, thank you. Then we have a closing statement by city staff. No, nothing new. Yeah, okay. All right, switch now to discussion by the board of the evidence and arguments presented, and if the board is okay with this, I'm fine with this being a little bit more informal, and if we want to be able to pose some questions to either the appellant or city staff, I think that's absolutely fine, or to follow up on this, but I'd certainly open it to any questions or comments.
Can I speak?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay, so this would be to you guys.
No, because again, it's based off the gross square footage, right? So if there's a floor, so the way the we calculate the gross square footage is, overlaying the interior dimensions inside the perimeter of the exterior walls, right? So if, whether there's a ceiling there or not is not really relevant because we're looking at the gross floor area.
I guess I'm having a hard time understanding how we're not counting that space twice, that square foot area twice. We're counting it as floor space, and then we're counting it again as second floor,
Correct.
even though there's no floor.
Correct. Because again, it's an area where fire can build up. They're still combustible in that area. The only thing that's missing is that floor.
What if these were 20-foot ceilings? What if this house was a 20-foot ceiling? So there was no second floor. Then that square footage wouldn't be counted twice. that cathedral ceiling.
Correct. The way that the definition is written, it would not be counted twice. It doesn't really, it's because it's not a cubic footage.
It's not cubic footage.
It's square footage.
And
Right.
so I'm having a hard time understanding why the gentleman, Mr. Gronkowski's, did you talk to him? Did you ask him?
No,
sir?
the
I
gentleman,
think that's a legitimate argument he had. You can't walk on it.
I mean, again, like, I see that side of it. It's a catch-22, right? You know, because it is a space that, you know, when you talk to the fire department, you know, the houses they've lost are the big, open, you know,
Yeah.
huge houses, right? Because, you know, as I mentioned in the report, right, the lightweight construction, all the things that we've come to know, you know, which increase the fire spread, which increase the hazards and all the things, you know, which is a benefit to, you know, contractors, you know, and allow us to build these houses much quicker, much bigger, much, you know, more open, so on and so forth. They also pose a hazard to the occupants and to the firefighters that are responding to those, right? You know, in the lightweight construction, I believe 4 minutes is, you know, going to be your flashover point, you know, your TGI, you know, your floor joists that, you know, fail a lot sooner than, you know, your standard 2-bys. So these are all the things that we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect the citizens that live there. We're trying to protect the firefighters that are responding. So again, these big open floor plans, you know, while they're big and beautiful, they also, you know, allow for a lot more smoke, a lot more heat, a lot more fire to develop, you know, because it's not, you know, from a fire service, they have what they call room and contents fire, right? You know, when you have, you know, 4 walls and 2 doors that lead into a dining room and a fire starts in there, it takes a lot for that fire to move out of that dining room into other parts of the house. You know, you may get some smoke damage, but you're not necessarily going to get, you know, the fire and the heat. Whereas, you know, when you have these big open floor plans, you know, that fire and heat, you know, just goes everywhere, right? So by the time, you know, it may activate a smoke alarm, or it may, you know, somebody may realize something's going on, you know, it can be, you know, a massive fire.
Yeah, I get your point, and please let me continue the conversation just to help me get a grasp on this. I don't see where the code is talking about cubic feet. I don't see that, because if it was, you would have attics. I mean, we have attics over in Stone Creek that are massive, that aren't counted within that calculation for a sprinkler system, and if they were, they would be needing sprinkler systems. So I'm having a hard time understanding how that's any different than this
So,
client.
and again, this is, you know, as, you know, ICC alluded to in their response, you know, this is our amended code. The International Residential Code would actually require sprinklers on all residences. You know, we actually amend that out. So if we were to go by their code, by the book, then every house that was built would require it. So when we proposed, you know, in the fall, or in the spring rather of last year, when we proposed, you know, these, you know, code changes, the fire department asked to, you know, put that in for the larger houses,
How did
because
we
we
come
are.
up with 6,000 and not 5,000, 50, or 3,000?
So we originally asked for 5,000.
Okay.
You know, that's what we proposed. In discussion with the board, I actually had done some, you know, calculations, went back and researched and found out how many houses that were built. And then, you know, then we determined that 6,000 was a more viable number, and we all came to an agreement that that was a starting point, right? Because in the future, you know, it's hard telling where this is going to go, because again, you know, the state's moving to adopt a building code, you know, at the state level. So, so in the research, you know, since 2002, we've built 1,420 new or new single or 2-family homes in the city of Urbana, 1,420. Of those homes, 32 were between 5,000 and 6,000 square feet. And then of that 1,420, only 19 fell above that 6,000 threshold. And so that's what the board went with and said, hey, you know, we agreed that there's, you know, we see a need for this, but we went to, you know, to the 6,000, because that only affected, you know, out of 1,420 homes, that only affected 19 homes. Whereas if you went at the 5,000, then you're looking at, 51 homes, right? So we cut that number in half just by going up to 6,000 versus 5,000.
One more question? Yeah, so another question, just to help these folks out, if we could. What if they put, Corey, what if we put a point-of-use sprinkler system within their mechanical room or within their garage, that would, we have a limited space sprinkler system that we can add per code. What if we did that brought this under the 6,000 square foot threshold?
So
the
I
way
thi-
you're calculating it. And
So I think the one thing to also consider here is in a single-family or two-family home, you actually are only putting in what's considered an NFPA 13D system, right? So that system is actually only going to be in the livable space, and it's basically just for egress, right? So it's going to go in the bedrooms and passive egress, right? So it's not even a full sprinkler system of the entire house.
So tell me where it goes.
So it goes in the passive egress and it goes
Passive
into,
would be the front entrance?
like
and
the hallways, yeah, from like bedrooms, out, right?
Where wouldn't it have to be? In the garage?
Yep, correct. So again, so some of these places that you're concerned about freezing, the garage, it's not required to be in because basically, again, it's designed to get people out or to get people in to make the rescue to get people out.
Do we count the garage in the calculation, though?
Yes.
It sounds like to me we need to work on that a little bit, maybe clarify that code a bit, but thanks, that's the only two questions I had.
Well, my question the other day and my comment was I was a little concerned about counting the second floor open space in that area calculation. I understand the need for and the possibility of additional fuel load, but when I read floor area gross, and maybe this is a definition, it says the gross floor area shall not include shafts with no openings or interior courts. And maybe there's a better definition of that term, interior courts. But when I look at the great room, the two-story space, the primary bedroom, the two-story space, seems, that we're kind of counting those twice in the gross area.
The thing that Brad mentioned that I think Nick, I'd be interested in y'all's sort of further commentary on it, is like a ranch-style home, or ranch home, a one-story home that had for whatever reason, the person decided to have a taller ceiling in an area. Let's say they wanted to do a basketball court or, whatever. We've seen different things like that before. If there wasn't a second floor as part of it, how would we look at like the 20-foot tall ceiling area in that basketball court area on that? Would we just count that floor area there, or would we assume that there could be a second floor there because of the height and then count the square feet? How would we, or I guess, how would staff interpret that?
Well, again, based off of how we wrote that code and that terminology, I think we would look at it as simply that, right? Is just the one floor.
Okay.
Right? Because again, if you look at, the building code, that you have gross floor area, which basically includes everything, and then you have net floor area, which then includes a very specific area. So for example, the terminology that was used in this code, we called it gross, right? So basically we should count everything. Whereas, if we called it net, then it would be basically truly that occupiable space, and we wouldn't count the space that, is not considered occupiable. So, but based off of how that code is written, based off the definition, based off the interpretation for ICC, it leads us back to, that is space within that gross area.
You understand though where that's a bit of a head scratcher.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you had theoretically the exact same setup and they just didn't have a second floor in there, we would treat that exact same space as a single-story space, not a two-story space.
Correct. And again, like I said, it's, we can look at cubic foot, right? There's multitude ways to look at the code, right? And it's how we define it or how we write it, right? So if we said, hey, we want to count the cubic feet, maybe that's more important to us, right? But that's not the terminology that was used. So, we're reverted back to, what was written. So,
So in the previous examples of the.
Brian, you want to come up here? Oh, right there's a mic.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, actually, given it's a public hearing, probably good if you just introduce yourself as well.
So sorry, I just wanted to mention that the previous examples of the attic.
Could you just introduce yourself real
Oh,
quick?
I'm
just-
sorry, my name's Brian Weldy, I'm a lieutenant with the Urbana Fire Department. So in those examples, I don't think is a good representation of what's going on here. So in the gymnasium, for example, you have a fire-rated corridor essentially that's sealed off by fire doors and it's compartmentalized. In the case of an attic or in the case of an added floor, you have assemblies that are, protected, fire-rated, fire-rated gypsum board, et cetera. In this case, we have a wide open space that has open living space that has access to it. So from our perspective, it would allow more rapid fire growth that could spread exponentially easier than in a compartmentalized construction. So.
Yeah, and that may have been a little bit misleading, I guess, when I was saying gymnasium. I wasn't necessarily talking about like a commercial gymnasium. I've seen, there's a handful of homes, I think, in this town where people have put basketball courts or half courts or whatever in their home. And I was just trying to envision something like that, where if it was a ranch home where you wouldn't necessarily have the fire-rated corridors, anything like that, there'd be no requirement for that for single-family residential, and you could theoretically have the same exact kind of a situation in terms of the ability for heat to build up and all that, but we wouldn't assign an implied second floor to that just because there isn't another second floor to, yeah.
So-
Oh, sorry.
And I think that brings up a great point I think you just hit on is, again, when you talk about those tall homes, right? What, for example, what is our potential for life loss in a 20-foot story or 20-foot high, one-story house, right? There's nothing. In this house, you have an open 2-story foyer or bedroom that, again, as, Brian mentioned, that allows the heat and smoke to directly go upstairs, which then, again, potentially can affect the egress from somebody from that second floor, much quicker, much faster. So I think, again, that's something to consider when you're saying, hey, what if it's 20 foot? Well, it's 20 foot, but there's nothing up there, right? It's dead space, where in this case, there's nothing up there, but it's not dead space because there's open hallways, there's bedrooms, there's that sort of thing that would be, open to, the fire, the heat, the smoke.
No, that's a fair point. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
I just think that there's a lot of speculation about this house in particular and how the fire might spread that is just being kind of presented without any, information that I feel like is objective. So we're saying that, if there was a fire in this house particularly because there's 2 stories, it would spread much more quickly than it would in a single story. But I don't necessarily think there's any information that would fully support that. Additionally, I would like to say, I know you said that there were 1,400 new homes that were built and only 14 or 21 maybe that were over 5,000 square feet.
32 were over 5,000.
I would be interested to know if those homes were, if the square footage was being measured in the same way, because I believe there was a conversation when you said even attic space would be included in the total.
No, he was
square
asking if it
footage.
was. It is not.
Okay, so you would not include attic space?
Correct.
Okay. But I guess my point is that I don't think that the homes that you're counting were measured in the same way that this house is being measured, because I think ultimately the finished square footage of this house will be 2,600 square feet, 2,800 square feet.
Yeah.
So we're not really
2661
talking,
is the
yeah,
living
so we're
area.
not really talking about a 6,000 square foot house. I think the perception is this is a massive house. It's not small, but it's not a 6,000 square foot home. And I think the spirit of the decision to require sprinkler systems in homes that are over 6,000 square feet was for larger homes, what people perceive to be a 6,000 square foot home. I don't think that it was for houses that are being built that even after the basement's finished or additional finished space won't exceed 3,600 square feet.
So, I'm sorry, you said the total without the garage and the basement is what?
It's 2661 on the first and second, so 2661.
Oh, all right, and or it could be a larger number depending upon how we interpret that, so, but some number like
Right, so
half, something like in the 3,000 range, regardless of how we interpret it.
Right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
did you, the gentleman you spoke to, the Phil Gronkowski, do you have any record of that, or do you have any follow-up emails or anything from him?
Yeah, actually I do. They send like a email that automatically closed out after you spoke with him.
Oh, I know, I guess I was saying more in terms of what the content of his answer was.
No.
Okay.
We just spoke on the phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nick, what would be your thought on why there would be, if we're going to take at face value, the appellant's sort of relaying that, why there would be a different interpretation?
Honestly, I don't know. Again, obviously it's an interpretation thing, right? And that was why, again, when I reached out to him, I was adamant that they provide me something,
In writing.
in writing.
Yeah.
And, because actually he called me and he's like,
Gronkowski did?
no,
No, he told
I don't remember the gentleman's name.
Chris Holland.
Yes, Chris Holland. So he called me and talked to me, and basically he's like, okay, you satisfied? I'm like, can you email it to me? And you could just,
Yeah,
all right, so again, like, he wanted to kind of knock it off, check it off off the list, but I was like, I want something in writing, something that, is tangible. So, again, I had to wait for him to, because it was probably a week before he actually sent me an email to follow up.
I would say to that point on why there might be two different definitions. Now, going off the residential and the commercial code, I went ahead and joined the ICC and called to talk to someone on the phone to try to get to the bottom of that. And he did make a point that in commercial buildings, when you have, say, a hotel with a big atrium in the middle, it's not uncommon to count that in your sprinkler system because you've got to account for that stuff. But that's why we're kind of getting to the point where we're not, I think that that's a different argument to be made kind of between you guys on how you're going to calculate that, but really the amendment to the code is just setting a limit to the size of the house, and the code reads 6,000 gross square foot. So whether you go back and say something else, if I want to calculate differently to account for 2 stories, maybe that's something that you never thought you would have had to do, and you could do it now. But by our understanding, within that code amendment, within that 6,000 foot limitation, you brought up a good point, Brad, too, and I had a similar conversation with Nick about that with the ceilings, and I said, well, we've got 2 rooms that are 2 stories tall that are causing our issues. If I were to raise those ceilings or lower those ceilings down to 15 foot, I couldn't realistically build 2 stories because it's going to be too tall. So then we have 2 15-foot rooms, then we would be well under the code by square footage wise. So where's the cutoff? What's the difference? And at that point, we kind of got into, getting to a Board of Appeals meeting, but it's kind of that area where we're just trying to get within square foot as opposed to, but that's why there's 2 different reasons and 3 different people saying 5 different things, because it is an interpretation deal and there's multiple different ways to look at it. It makes sense. I understand for fire reasons and everything, but that's why when I applied for this, it was strictly based off the definition of a square footage and not based off anything else, so. It's designed, to be completely honest with you, I didn't realize that there was an amendment for 6,000 square foot, right? So that was news to me. So everything else about the house has been approved by all their village offices, and this is the only kind of bugaboo right now.
Did you work with the city to see if some minor design changes that the owner would be, that would get you into that square foot?
So that was a conversation that we had, and that was where I got to, okay, these ceilings are 20 feet tall right now. I mean, they're 10-foot first floor. Then we've got that floor system that's about 1 foot, and then the second floor is 9 foot, so we're 20 foot tall. Now, if we were to build a second floor above those rooms, the maximum height we can be is 7 feet tall, right? So that would be a 18 feet tall. So if I go to 17 foot tall ceilings where it's attic space, but it's 17 foot tall, would that be still calculated? And it was kind of the same conversation you had where he said, well, it's square foot, not cubic foot. And then I said, well, that kind of is what the point I'm trying to make, and then we got into other things. So that was my original offering. Otherwise, essentially, if we're accounting for both of those rooms twice, it's kind of a redesign of the plan in order to get, because it's, by his calculations, it's 6,500 square foot, so dropping 500 off is
Pretty tough.
a sizable, yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, just, I know this is hypothetical, Nick, but what would be is there a ceiling height at which, if there was a great room, a two-story great room, is there a ceiling height at which you wouldn't imply that second floor?
I mean, I don't know, because obviously we haven't really
No,
thought
I
about
know
that.
that's-
But
it's
again,
hypothetical, but-
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, if that's still open to the second floor, we still, we don't have that compartmentalization, right? Which, again, makes a difference, right? And the other thing I will just throw out there is, this is the second time we've had a situation with this code. However, the other developer redesigned their house to fit within the requirement. They came in at 5,995 square feet, right? As an architect, you can appreciate that, right? You know what the code is, you know what your limit is, and sometimes you build to that limit, right? And if you need to exceed that limit, then obviously you have to take, whatever those things are into consideration.
The thing, I'm sorry, let me speak. The thing that bothers me would be, there's already been expense. I think in good faith. I think you were designing in good faith. Additional expenses to your project, which my guess is probably way over the budget.
Already, yeah.
At this point. So if we could figure out a way to help with that, I think that's our duty.
A couple of things. The other homeowner that was having this issue, their solution was to build a 2-car garage, and then once the house is done, they're going to extend it to a 3-car because the code doesn't apply if it's an alteration. So, I mean, yes, they did, but like, they didn't really. The point is it's just an inconvenience. It's making harder for people to build in Urbana. Adding a fire sprinkler system from, $25,000 per 2,000 square feet is basically kind of what I've been getting.
So I reached out
I
to
wasn't
4
finished
vendors.
speaking, but, yeah. The other thing that I think is worth noting is that I actually had this plan, another version of the same plan approved last year before I came to Signature and asked them to make some alterations and to take over as a general contractor. This house is smaller than the original plans that were approved, and so I would say that it was built in good faith. It was built, I have put significant amount of investment into having these plans built. We've been waiting for 2 months because of this issue, so I would appreciate, the consideration with those kind of things in mind.
Nick, you were saying that you had felt like you had some cost information or something.
Correct. So I reached out to 4 local fire sprinkler companies, 3 of which got back to me. And I got a price from anywhere from $2 to $6. So
2 to 6.
correct, depending on the vendor.
2 to 6,000, you said?
$2 to $6 per square foot.
Oh, per square foot.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, $2 to $6 per square foot, depending on the vendor. And obviously, depending on the design, where or requirements, right? Because again, you can do concealed heads, you can do, a very basic exposed system, right? So, that is the range that they provided.
Pretty wide range.
Yeah. So one vendor was $2 to $3, one vendor was approximately $4, and the other one was $5 to $6. So, and that's how they broke down.
That gets applied to, like, when we say per square foot, is that like, so is this for the 6,000 feet or for the 3,000 that's actually occupiable, or you probably didn't get into that?
I didn't get into the nuts and bolts, and actually a couple of them asked for the plans, and I was like,
That's
I'm
not
not
your job.
going there.
Yeah.
I'm just, can you give me a ballpark? So I had something that, because in the original research that I had done, that was, from, I believe, around 21, 22, it said on national average was like $1.45. So I was like, okay, are we close to that? Where have we landed since, like everything else has gone up? And so, like I said, this was just in the last couple of weeks that I reached out to these vendors.
Yeah, because I kind of do remember when we had the conversation about the sprinkler component, that question was raised, and for some reason, $2 a square foot as a starting point was mentioned at that time. I can't swear by that number, but I kind of remember that came up when we were walking through this issue with staff.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions or anything else from board members? Okay. All right, so what we need to do is we're required as a board to have somebody make a motion to approve the appeal, okay, or grant it. And the motion has to be in the format, I move that the appeal of, and then put the appeal number, that, okay, in case number, that be granted, okay? So somebody has to make that, then there'll be a second of that motion, and then we'll have a vote on that motion. So if there are 2 votes or more, 2 or 3 votes saying yes to approve that motion, then the appellant's motion is granted. If it fails to get at least 2 votes, then it's denied. Does that make sense? So it has to be in that format.
Yeah. So I move to approve the appeal BSCBA 24-A-01, Signature Homes Appeal of Section R-313.2 of the 2021 International Residential Code and calculation of square footage interpretation.
Right. And I'm sorry, I apologize. Because it's a mandatory motion, there's not a second required. I just saw that in our bylaws. Okay, so there is a motion on the floor that's now subject to a vote for the board members present who are not disqualified in any manner, which I don't think any of us are, and that should be on a roll call basis. Please. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the appeal is granted. All right, at the conclusion of the vote appeal, so I'll direct department staff at this point to prepare a final decision of this order. It shall contain the following: the violation notice, today's date, list of the 3 board members that are present, description of the vote of each board member voting on the appeal, a recitation of that appeal that had been granted or denied, in this case granted, and a recitation of finding of facts, if any, were provided in support of that decision. And then I will sign that decision upon its generation. It's just in the bylaws, just follow the.
I thought you were just reading this stuff.
I was just reading it. All right. With that, then, I'm to entertain a motion to close the public hearing portion of our agenda. Motion by Gary, second. Second by Brad. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, that closes the public hearing portion of our meeting. I gotta find my agenda now. Thank you. Open for any public comment. I see none here. Any other board business? No? Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you.